Hi guys, I've been saying for some time that if Reform UK want to be a real threat to both Labour and the Conservatives, they need to be more than a one-trick pony. They need to sell something other than just anti-immigration rhetoric. This point was reinforced by polling expert Sir John Curtice when he appeared on Reform UK friendly GB News. John says that while Reform may benefit from the anti-incumbent feeling at the next general election, well, that will only go so far. Have a listen.
Now, so far as Reform are concerned, Reform are potentially something of a threat to Labour. You're quite right to point out there are now about 90 constituencies where they start off in second place, and a poll at the weekend suggests actually once you go into the innards of it, what you discover is it's Labour's vote that's falling particularly markedly in some of those constituencies rather than Reform's vote particularly rising. Reform are now picking up some of the discontent with Labour, but only some of it because, again, as a poll from Survation pointed out today, some of the folk who are unhappy of Labour are the folk who think that Labour are too tough on migrants and who will follow the woke agenda that Reform are very much against, but they're wandering off to the Greens or the Liberal Democrats. And the Reform are still finding it easier to pick up Tory voters than Labour voters. But that said, they are now picking up some of the discontent with Labour. I think the question that Reform have to face, however, is that if they are going to really succeed in winning over Labour voters, they are actually going to have to pivot away from some of the agenda that you were talking about. Labour voters, for the most part, are not particularly concerned about immigration. Labour voters, for the most part, are in favour of reversing the Brexit decision. I think if Reform are going to succeed in eating away at Labour's vote, what they've got to focus on are the issues and the problems that were facing this country in July and on which so far the government hasn't made much discernible progress. That is, one, the economy, and two, the state of the public services. And I think the point simply is that Nigel Farage is very, very good at articulating the relatively pessimistic mood of the nation. But I think he's going to have to focus on those issues.
So, John.
Well said. You know, I've been saying the same thing. And if you look at what's happening within the media's focus is, of course, on Nigel Farage and Reform UK at the expense of where a significant amount of vote share is going. For example, the Greens, Independents, and the Liberal Democrats. See, I don't know why. Maybe it's because Nigel Farage is a charismatic figure, or the media think it's exciting that Reform UK are eating into Labour's vote, or that Reform UK could somehow replace the Conservatives. But they're missing a significant amount of vote share going to left-wing parties or the Liberal Democrats. I really don't understand why the media isn't talking more about that. Instead, the focus is on Reform UK. Now, as John has pointed out, of course, if Reform UK want to expand their base, if they want to truly be the party of opposition, well, they need to moderate their tone on immigration, for example. But if they do that, they risk turning off the far-right voters that currently support them. You know, they're in power because of people who have extreme views on immigration, people who are angry with the Conservative Party. Now, as John pointed out, people will be angry with the Labour government, so they're likely to want to give them a bloody nose and they'll vote for Reform. But there's a ceiling there. If Farage only talks about immigration and it's anti-immigration, then he's limiting himself. As John Curtice pointed out, you know, there are people on the left, people in the centre who are not interested in talking about immigration, and certainly not the way that Nigel Farage wants to talk about it. They want to talk about other policies. But a problem for Farage and Reform is if they start talking about the environment, protecting the environment, or building homes, affordable homes, if they start talking about funding properly the NHS or a stronger social safety net, they will undermine their appeal to their donors. Because Reform UK, at the end of the day, is a pro-rich party. It's a party for the rich. It's about bringing down taxes for the rich. It's about removing regulations. They want to move the country to the right on social issues, but the motivation behind that is to move the country to the right on economic issues. So to bring down taxes for the rich, to cut regulations, remove protections for workers, the environment, for consumers. That's what it's all about. And, if you don't believe me, look at how they voted recently when it came to a workers' rights bill. Reform UK voted against it. They claim to be the party of ordinary people, the party of the workers. Well, they voted against a bill that would have strengthened worker protections. So Reform UK are selling something to the public, an anti-immigration position. They're selling the idea that they're not the Labour Party, but they're limiting themselves if they truly want to be the party of opposition. Because while the Conservatives are extremely unpopular, Kemi Badenoch is extremely useless when it comes to selling the Tory brand, at least the Conservatives can sell something more than just anti-immigration rhetoric. And that's why it's difficult for Reform, at least at the moment, to overtake the Conservatives completely. According to polls, yes, but the real poll is the one on election day, and we'll have to wait for that. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.